Hey everyone, welcome to Youth Mobs. I'm Craig.
I'm Carson.
I'm Dominic.
I'm David.
And we're the voice of young conservatives in Alachua County. Meta, the parent company of Facebook and Instagram, is making a lot of changes in the past week or two. Carson, what are those changes and how do you feel about them?
Yeah, so the two major changes that they're making are, number one, they are scaling back content moderation. So they're not completely getting rid of content moderation. They are just scaling it back heavily. I think Zuckerberg himself likened it to like a 90% to a 10% change, something like that. And then number two, they are adding a community notes-like feature, which would essentially democratize the fact-checking. So you're not going to just have a bunch of these very biased left-wing people fact-checking the information. It's going to be primarily democratized, done by the audience.
Right, just like X. And Dominic, does that resonate with you? How do you feel about it?
Yeah, I definitely think that Zuckerberg is making some well-needed changes to Meta, especially with the fact-checkers who have been proven to be continuously biased with which information they choose to take down from the platform. And I think another important thing to mention is that Zuckerberg recently revealed that the Biden administration requested that content related to vaccine side effects, like even true side effects, would have to be taken down from the platform. And I just think that is a complete violation of the Constitution. And it's definitely not the role of the government to control which speech is allowed to be on a platform. It is the role of the user to discern which content they choose to believe and what they think is true.
Exactly. Yes, that's very true. It's a shame to see all the censorship that was occurring in the past, the serious effects of the COVID vaccine. I personally don't think that Mark Zuckerberg is entirely changing into a new person, having a complete new leaf. I think that there is some adjustment on his end, but I think it's more opportunism and recognizing the market and the political situation. If Harris won the election, I don't think he'd be doing any of this. I think he'd double down. But David, do you agree with that?
I agree. And Mark Zuckerberg isn't the only one doing this. It's also companies like Toyota and Bud Light that have been cutting down their DEI initiatives and their woke initiatives. And I think it speaks to the beauty of capitalism in that companies and corporations can really resonate with the voice of the people. They heard the voice of the people when they said that they weren't for the DI initiatives through how they voted in the election. In order to add value to those people so that they can make a profit, they decided to follow through with what the people wanted.
And Carson, our resident capitalist, super capitalist friend, what do you think of that? Is Meta really following the market here?
Yes, and I want to say, I think that more so, what you said about if Harris had been elected, they would probably have not done this. Yeah, of course, because they're going to follow the culture, and they're not going to make changes if the people aren't, showing that in their vote. And obviously, you're not voting on whether Meta is going to censor certain information, but I think the culture does generally shift, and the elections are reflective of that. So, Trump having a 6-point shift in the popular vote, yeah, it probably did affect Mark Zuckerberg's decision here, and I think it really goes to show that you can just let the market handle these things. If it is an unpopular thing, which is, what this censorship was, yeah, the market can handle it. You don't need the government to step in and say, actually, you can't censor conservatives on your platform. It's their platform. They can do what they want. And it turned out it was actually not good for them to censor certain opinions.
I see what you mean, though I would say at the end of the day, you look at the outcome and what the outcome is of that censorship. I see it as a net negative for society, a negative for conservatives, a negative for our political discourse in the country. So I say, yes, even though it may be unappealing oftentimes to have the government get involved, I think that this is a legitimate place for the government to stop censorship, to promote free speech, to encourage open dialogue, especially with Meta's multi-trillion-dollar market cap.
Well, Craig, I'd respond to that with the fact that that's a slippery slope. If you're going to say the government can come in and dictate what you do with your content moderation policy, when there's a Democrat, you're going to see them justify it with the same sort of logic in what they did with Meta. I mean, what they did with Meta, they tried to censor certain real facts that sometimes were even promoted by the CDC and say you cannot include that on your website, or at the very least, we want you to not, and we're going to threaten your subsidies or your different promotions by the government. So I think it's a slippery slope. I think we need to have the government completely off hands with this. You don't need to, be dictating what's on a social media platform.
I disagree with that somewhat. I definitely think that the government shouldn't be able to tell the social media companies what they are and aren't allowed to put on their or keep on their platform, but they should have the authority to tell social medias that they can't censor any speech because like when companies have the ability to censor speech, obviously that can be politically biased, and a company like X or Meta just has so much, influence over the population because, millions of people use those platforms, and, allowing for political bias to overtake them is very dangerous, and it can lead to brainwashing and indoctrination and pushing a certain political narrative.
I am concerned about their influence on the market and the population at large. But David, I know you don't use Meta platforms as much, but do, say, your friends, are they paying attention to less censorship, more censorship, whatever the situation may be at a given time on the platforms, or not really? They're just browsing for memes.
Well, a lot of people are also browsing for memes and don't know what's going on. But I think most people do appreciate less censorship. Yeah, and again, that goes back to what you guys were saying about the government and corporations. The thing about it is that it goes back to the problem where we need the government to fix solutions, which the government started the problems. If the government never intertwined with corporations or with with Meta platforms in the first place, then we wouldn't need them to go ahead and make these policies in order to protect free speech, which they've been they fund NGOs, and the NGOs fund these corporations in order to go ahead and so that the government has power over these corporations so that they can limit free speech for government's agenda. So if the government, so I agree with you, Carson, in the sense that if the government just never interfered with corporations in the first place, we wouldn't need them to protect free speech. But since the government and corporations have intertwined when they shouldn't have, I feel like we might need the government in order to protect free speech.
Interesting thoughts. But Carson, do you think people will trust these changes, or are they going to be skeptical?
I think that generally the people who already left Meta platforms for X, who were being censored under the previous policies, sets of policies, I think they're probably not going to trust the changes. I think they're probably not going to change platforms. And it's going to just need to be on the individual scale, people starting to move back to these platforms, which Instagram's already booming. It's just about the specifics of why you're using Instagram, moving back over there more for political content and less for what most people use it for, is personal content. And as people move back, then I think you're going to start seeing the creators also start to move back because, let's face it, creators are going to go where the people are. They want to go where they're going to have the largest audience.
Right. And to that point, is Meta just trying to, say, pick up these celebrities who have left X under Elon Musk?
I'm not sure. I don't think that there's a huge chunk of them, and if there is, I think you're going to need to see these Meta platforms start to cater more towards political content. I go on these platforms. To be completely transparent, I don't use Facebook, but when I go on Instagram, I don't see political content. I really, like David said, I just see the memes. And so if you see that these platforms start to promote more political content, which I think Zuckerberg said was part of their policy changes, then yeah, I do think they could start to win back. Having a little bit more of a center left as opposed to X's generally center right bias, I'm sure they could.
Interesting. And with that being said, looking at the censorship in regards to Meta, we have a setting deep down buried in there where you can choose to show or hide political content. The default setting is that you can't see that stuff. It's off. So you're going to, yes, see political content, of course, but the stuff that in the past Zuckerberg had really disagreed with, that stuff was hidden. I think that it just shows how unwilling they are to cater to free speech in years past, and perhaps the seismic change that's occurred now, given that they are significantly reducing the content moderation. But Dominic, if you were in control, you're the CEO, what would you do with Meta? How would you change things?
Well, I'm a full-on supporter of the First Amendment and free speech, so I believe, as long as you're not, directly threatening someone or directly threatening to harm someone, that you should be free to say what you want to say. Again, I don't believe it's the responsibility of any CEO or the government to decide what people should and shouldn't see. It's the responsibility of the individual to decide what they want to believe and, to determine what aligns with their own values. So, yeah.
And David, how about you? Would you agree with that approach? And are there any specific changes you'd like to see be made to Meta?
Yeah, I would agree with that approach, and I think that would also give me the most value because I feel that people want to have more uncensored content, and they don't want to be persuaded by the government or corporations to think this way or think that way, but they want to make up their own minds.
Absolutely. And Carson, I want to leave you with the closing thought. Any final thoughts and things that you would do if CEO of Meta?
Yeah, I would just completely, open up the floodgates. Obviously, there are certain things that you cannot have because advertisers will not like it. I mean, frankly, that's why you've seen a lot of advertisers leave X, is because it has become, obviously a lot of the stuff that was being censored under the previous leadership was being censored completely wrongly. But now you've seen it almost swing in the opposite direction, where there's some things that are like so blatantly almost like Nazi rhetoric, which I would not, I know that word gets thrown around and way overused, but I would say in certain cases it almost applies, and I'm sure you guys have seen it on the platform. And so, there needs to be a sort of middle ground where there's stuff that's like very, very obviously, going to, at the very least going to shut away advertisers, right? But the majority, I would say 90% of the stuff that was being censored, if not 95%, should not have been. And so we need to open up the floodgates, except for the stuff that's like blatantly racist.
Understandable. And I think that just goes to show, like, yes, there's a lot that didn't need to be censored. There's a lot that shouldn't have been censored. But now hopefully we'll see, as those changes come into the algorithm, what adjustments are made and how much it opens up free speech. But that being said, thanks everyone so much for watching. We really appreciate it. We upload 3 times a week. If you'd like to reach out to us, feel free at youthbombs@electoralrepublicans.com. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks so much, everyone.